The first question is, how were you first introduced to Wonder Woman?
Ruth Sutherland is the co-host of the podcasts Warlord Worlds, Trekker Talk, devoted to sci-fi bounty hunter Mercy St. Clair from Trekker Comics by Ron Randall, and Xenozoic Xenophiles, devoted to the comic adventure series Xenozoic Tales and Cadillac's Dinosaurs by Mark Schultz.
Oh, so my first introduction to Wonder Woman was the television series with Linda Carter in the 70s. Perfect timing for my age, and the first superhero that I really came to know and understand. Around that same time period, I was also introduced to Isis, who was on television, and then Batman and Superman. And one of my favorite things to go outside and play was Wonder Woman, and I would twirl around and around in a circle just like she would for her costume changes. So that's a really nostalgic memory for me. Not the comics. It was more of the Super Friends, cartoon images, the television show, and just seeing her in popular culture early on. It wasn't until much later that I actually read the comics. Really, in our small town, I didn't have the access, and my parents weren't fans like Darren's dad was to bring me the comics. Didn't get to read any of those as a kid.
Darren Sutherland is Ruth's co-host on Trekker Talk, Xenozoic Xenophiles, and Warlord Worlds, devoted to the comic creations of Mike Grell, including Warlord, John Sable, and Green Arrow. And both have appeared elsewhere, including the Secret Origins podcast and the Lonely Hearts Romance Comics podcast.
Well, for me, Wonder Woman has been part of my life really since as far back as I can remember, because growing up in the 70s, the character really was everywhere at that time. I watched Super Friends every Saturday morning. My parents and I watched together the Linda Carter TV series every week when it was on. I even remember we watched the Kathy Lee Crosby movie that one time it aired on television. I remember watching that with them. And my dad was really great to me because he loved DC Comics as well. For my birthdays and Christmas, he would buy me these nice hardback collections of DC Comics, Superman, Batman, Shazam, and he got me that wonderful hardback Wonder Woman book with the introduction by Gloria Steinem. So I got to read a lot of the original classic Golden Age and Silver Age comics. I was young enough at that point in time that the short, simplistic stories of the Golden Age were perfect for me at my age because they were really quick, easily accessible, easy to understand. A lot of them were World War II related. Growing up when I did, World War II was a generation before, so there were lots of movies and TV shows that were about it and on TV all the time. It all seemed very accessible to me. What I remember with Wonder Woman is it's interesting because she was a superhero that it was still okay for a boy to like, because a boy liking Wonder Woman, there was no problem with that because everyone sort of liked Wonder Woman. But I also remember my dad, I guess, would pick up occasional comics here and there, so I got to read an interesting variety because I even, though they were a few years older, I can remember reading some of the Wonder Woman comics when she had lost her powers and she was basically a copycat of Diana Rigg from the Avengers, which that was okay to me too because I was watching the Avengers and reruns on TV and loved it. So I even liked Wonder Woman in that version. I got a lot of variety of Wonder Woman in the 70s as a kid, but loved it all. I've been a fan all the way, really just loved everything about the character.
Matthew is the host of the podcast Radio Free Themyscira.
For me, it probably would have been the Bruce Timm cartoon show, the Justice League show, way back in the day.
Ryan, Count Druncula Daly, is currently the host of the podcasts The Power of Fishnets, the Black Canary and Zatanna podcast, Give Me Those Star Wars, and the brand new horror anthology Midnight, the Podcasting Hour. He's also formerly responsible for Secret Origins, Dead Bothan Spies, and the Flower and Fishnets blog and podcast.
Oh, wow. That is a good question, and I don't know. It's sort of, we've used this term before, but she seems like one of those primordial characters that was always there. And I couldn't tell you if it was through merchandising or if it was through the legendary Superpower show, or if it was a rerun of the old Linda Carter show, which was on before I was born, or if it was on like a merchandise, like a t-shirt or an action figure or something. I couldn't tell you, but I feel like as long as I've known who Superman and Batman and Robin are, I've also known who Aquaman and Wonder Woman were. She was just always there. she's never gone away. I've always seen her as a fundamental part of the foundation of the DC Comics world. Whether or not I could conceive of the Trinity with Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, whether or not that's an accurate description of their relationship, she always just felt of a piece with them.
Angela is the host of Wonder Woman, Warrior for Peace, a podcast that explores the history of Wonder Woman on page and screen.
Honestly, I don't remember when I would have first heard of Wonder Woman. Probably it would have been the Justice League cartoon from the 2000s, but at the time I was a diehard Marvel fangirl, and I thought that anything DC was dated and corny. So when I first saw her, I thought that Wonder Woman was this weird, outdated character in a star-spangled bathing suit. I didn't start getting into DC until years later, and I discovered this Superman fan-made audio drama podcast, and then that spun off 2 sister shows, one for Batman and one for Wonder Woman, and I listened to all 3 because, well, I'm a completionist and they would cross over from time to time. And at first it was just, yeah, I'm listening to this so I can get the whole story, but slowly I realized I was really liking this Wonder Woman show. And I eventually learned that those stories were inspired by Greg Rucka's first run on her solo series. So I checked out a few trades from the library and I really liked them, and it kind of snowballed from there.
Dr. Ange has been running Supergirl comic box commentary, offering daily posts on the Maid of Might since 2008. He was also a frequent contributor to the DC Bloodlines blog Incarnation, and is a recurring guest on the Waiting for Doom podcast, the Secret Origins podcast, and many other shows in the Fire and Water Network. And we both keep threatening the Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Krypton podcast, but we just don't think the world's ready for it.
I was anticipating that this was going to be a question, and I've been reading comic books for so long that it's hard for me to remember exactly where I first saw her, whether it was some early Justice League or the Super Friends or other comics. I kind of have always felt like I've known her, so I can't remember a specific time where I was like, wow, who's that? She's new. If you made me put money down, I would probably say the Super Friends cartoon.
I'm here with Paquita Trotamundos, occasional guest star on the Marvel Superheroes podcast. Not a big comic book person, but does enjoy a lot of comics-related media.
Wonder Woman is one of the most iconic characters in the comic strip, cartoons, and TV show. So if I have to pinpoint to one particular point in time, I cannot remember that. Pretty much I grew up throughout my life knowing who Wonder Woman was. I never read anything about her. I don't think I ever saw the cartoons. I don't think I saw the TV show nor the movie, but I knew of her existence as the same thing as Superman. I did not read Superman or anything, so it just kind of is there. Like I said, I've never been too keen into reading into her, or I know there's a lot of girls that they have like all this merchandise. I think my sister had like a couple of merchandise of her, you know, like a little lunchbox or something more in those terms, like for school. And I remember on my school, they used to have girls having it, but I personally never had anything, and I just kind of, osmosis.
According to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, All American Comics Incorporated released the December-January cover-dated All-Star Comics number 8 on October 25th, 1941. The cover trumpeted 2 new members win their spurs in this new book-length adventure of the Justice Society of America, featuring Hawkman, the Atom, Dr. Fate, the Spectre, the Sandman, Johnny Thunder, Dr. Midnight, and Starman, those last 2 being the new members. Their induction takes up most of the book. The story's by Gardner F. Fox, and there's a whole slew of artists involved. There was also a 2-page text story starring Hop Harrigan, as he and his buddy Tank Tinker do a bunch of aerial feats, inviting guest stars Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, The Flash, Dr. Midnight, and Hawkman. But for our purposes, and for most of the rest of the public's, our main point of interest is the last story at the very back of the book, introducing Wonder Woman. At last, in a world torn by the hatreds and wars of men, appears a woman to whom the problems and feats of men are mere child's play. A woman whose identity is known to none, but whose sensational feats are outstanding in a fast-moving world. With 100 times the agility and strength of our best male athletes and strongest wrestlers, she appears as though from nowhere to avenge an injustice or right a wrong. As lovely as Aphrodite, as wise as Athena, with the speed of Mercury and the strength of Hercules, she is known only as Wonder Woman. But who she is, or whence she came, nobody knows. To begin the story, a World War II-era propeller plane sputtered out of gas and crash-landed on an uncharted isle amidst a vast ocean. 2 beautiful inhabitants spy the accident and rush to survey the scene. The blonde Amazon Mala was startled to find a male pilot, while a raven-haired princess pulled the man from the wreckage. The princess rushed the pilot pilot to the local hospital on foot, carrying the grown man through ancient Grecian streets as though he were but a boy. Toga-clad Amazons looked on in disbelief that a man was on their island, and the queen was alerted. The doctor, wearing a fabulous skin-bearing white dress and square diamond-shaped eyeglasses, determined that the pilot had a concussion and could not be moved for days. Just then, Queen Hippolyte arrived, full of questions. The doctor explained everything up to the present, and provided her queen with documents found on the pilot's person. The papers revealed him to be Captain Steve Trevor of the United States Army Intelligence Service. Hippolyte ordered Trevor's eyes covered so that he would learn nothing of the island on waking, and requested Trevor receive the best possible care. The queen also ordered Trevor's plane to be repaired so that he could leave the island as soon as possible. The queen's only daughter remained at Trevor's bedside, helping the doctor on 14-hour-plus shifts to see to the pilot's care. After a number of days, the doctor asked that the princess be disallowed from the hospital due to her strange behavior around the ailing man, which Hippolyte recognized as love. "I was afraid of that. You are quite right, doctor. I shall take steps immediately." The princess was barred from the hospital and begged her mother to explain why she would put up barriers between herself and the only man she could recall ever seeing. Queen Hippolyte explained that in ancient Greece, centuries past, their people ruled the foremost nation in all the world, Amazonia. One day, the demigod Hercules was taunted into landing an attack force on the Amazon's shores. With the help of Hippolyte's magic girdle, a gift from the goddess Aphrodite, the queen defeated Hercules in combat. However, Hercules later used deceit and trickery to secure the magic girdle for himself and enslave the Amazons. Angry that her people had succumbed to the wiles of men, Aphrodite turned from the Amazons in their time of need. After submitting to the men for an unendurable time, Hippolyte successfully appealed to Aphrodite and had the magic girdle restored to her possession. Thus empowered, the queen and her Amazons swiftly turned the tables on their masters, and then sailed off on Hercules' ships to a new shore. Aphrodite had demanded as a condition of the release that the Amazons take up residence on an isolated island bereft of men, and that they forevermore wear the liberated shackles of their former captors as bracelets. Reminder that we must always keep aloof from men. After some time on the seas, the Amazons located and settled on Paradise Island, so fertile a land that there would never be cause for conflict among one another. Further, the island granted the Amazons to indeed be a race of wonder women. Such was the promise of Aphrodite, while the goddess of wisdom, Athena, graced the Amazons with a gift of her own, just after they defeated the Herculeans. Through the magic sphere, an incongruous flat viewing portal to events across time and space, the Amazons were able to keep up with the developments of the outside world, and even, at times, to forecast the future. This is why we Amazons have been able to far surpass the inventions of the so-called man-made civilization. We are not only stronger and wiser than men, but our weapons are better, our flying machines are further advanced. Hippolyte had also used the sphere to teach her daughter all the arts and sciences and languages of modern as well as ancient times. Hippolyte completed her history lesson for her daughter, then employed the magic sphere to see the events leading up to Captain Trevor's arrival. Although his superior officer felt Trevor was Army Intelligence's most valuable man, Steve insisted he alone be allowed to pursue a vital clue that could bring down a spy ring in the USA. Trevor managed to get the drop on their Teutonic leader, Von Storm, but was knocked out by Fritz the drivers crashing their vehicle into a tree. Trevor was then dumped in a robot plane which was used to launch an airstrike against an American hangar. Trevor was roused early into the assault and wrested control of the plane, flying it in pursuit of an enemy bomber over the ocean. Pushing the plane to its limits, Trevor crashed on Paradise Island. The princess insisted Trevor must be returned to America to complete his mission, but the queen needed to consult her goddesses first. The young lady thought, "It wouldn't be any trick at all for me to fly him back myself, but mother would never hear of it." Aphrodite and Athena bade Hippolyte to defend American liberty and freedom through her strongest and wisest Amazon, as the U.S. was the last citadel of democracy and equality in the world's war against the forces of hatred and oppression. The gods had decreed the arrival of Captain Trevor to set the wheels in motion, and Hippolyte would call all but one of her Amazons to a tournament which would determine their champion. Only her daughter was forbidden. "The winner must take this man back to America and never return, and I couldn't bear to have you leave me forever." The great day was upon the Amazons, as each wore a number and took part in tests to prove their speed, strength, and agility. The final contestants were number 12, the princess's friend Mala, and number 7, the mysterious masked maiden. The pair's final and greatest test would be bullets and bracelets, in which 5 shots would be fired from a handgun at each finalist. They would have to deflect every shot, or else be wounded and lose by default. The masked maiden defended herself against each shot, while Mala was fast, but not fast enough to avoid a strike to her shoulder. Queen Hippolyte congratulated number 7, and asked the masked maiden to reveal herself as the strongest and most agile of all the Amazons. Hippolyta knew it. "I felt it," but still exclaimed, "Daughter, you!" Acknowledging it was too late to change the results now. "You've won, and I'm very proud of you. In America, you'll indeed be a Wonder Woman. Let yourself be known as Diana, after your godmother, the goddess of the moon. And here's a costume I have designed to be used by the winner to wear in America. Why, mother, it's lovely." And so Diana, the Wonder Woman, giving up her heritage and her right to eternal life, leaves Paradise Island to take the man she loves back to America, the land she learns to love and protect and adopt as her own. Can you imagine being a boy in late 1941, reading 67 pages of Justice Society of America related stories in All-Star Comics number 8, and finding this 9-page gem stashed at the very back? A time when you could actually be misled into believing that Queen Hippolyte was perhaps this mysterious Wonder Woman, given that the only other brunette is her unnamed lovesick daughter. How about all those girls in just brasiers and short skirts? Or the strip being interrupted 2 pages in by by a couple of pages of heavy text with small illustrations telling the history of these Amazons. What a trip. It even works both ways for the informed reader. As you'll note, the unnamed cameos made by General Darnell and Dr. Althea, the absence of Diana's birth legend or the lasso of truth, and the only action being driven by Steve Trevor. I think the Masked Maiden alias is given more often than Diana's name, revealed only in the next to last panel in such a way it could lead one to wonder if it was also an alias. Heck, with all those Amazons vying for the title of Wonder Woman over the years, you'd think at least one would have settled for the Masked Maiden. Regardless, the first appearance of Wonder Woman is an engrossing read, making up for some of William Moulton Marston's storytelling deficits with fascinating details and the uniqueness of the premise. Harry G. Peters' art is technically crude, but undeniably dynamic, and he packs a lot of story into some seriously tiny panels, some roughly an inch and a half square as printed on the comic page. It's also worth noting that the Wonder Woman figure in the splash panel is nearly identical to the one featured on the cover of Sensation Comics #1, aside from a thicker outline and a thinner face for Diana. All in all, a most impressive debut. What are your basic impressions of Wonder Woman?
I like her, but it's like I said, I don't have too much in-depth information about her. I know that she was the daughter of like this queen and the Amazons and the warriors, and she's like fearful for proving herself and going into battle, and she just loves exploring and all that, but that is just very broad. It doesn't give me too much about how she is, like how her emotions. I never can see how she is on the inside.
Well, the first thing that always comes to mind for me is how strong she is. But then immediately after that, I think of her as being noble and a leader, because you have that sort of princess, daughter of the queen aspect of her that shines through. But I also think of her as being an idealist, but who also has a little bit of naivete. And it makes for a really well-rounded character who can be, strong and determined one moment and yet contemplative and thoughtful and questioning of herself the next.
Okay, what is my basic impression of her? I'd say she's strong, like, well, pretty much every hero. But what makes her different is that instead of wanting to always beat her enemies in battle, she'd much rather bring them over to her side with love and compassion.
Obviously, she is sort of a difficult character, and I'm sure that you're going to chastise me for saying that. I've always loved the character in theory, because I think it's great that she's a strong female character, and I think it's great that she has this tie to Greek mythology, which I was really into as a kid. I enjoy the idea that she's both a warrior and an ambassador for peace, and how do you sort of meld that duality together? And I think it takes somebody really excellent to be able to pull that off. And so when I look at my comic book collection, I have like 4 or 5 issues of any number of runs of Wonder Woman that I must have started and then just said, no, this person doesn't seem to have the same take as I do. And I kind of leave the book and then come back.
Oh, I think she's very clever, and I admire that in her. I like it when she solves things and figures out what's going on and uses her wits as she is fighting evil or whatever the case might be. I admire her strength and her power, and I like that she's able to work independently as a superhero or work collaboratively with others when she needs. And I always enjoy seeing a strong female character in a story. I think that is important to women as well as men to see, strong, powerful, successful women in their stories.
The simplest answer is she is one of my favorite comic book characters. She's in my top 3 DC characters, and I think my top 3 DC are better than my top 3 Marvel, so that would make her one of my top 3 all-time comic book characters. I like the character, but it is one of these weird things where so much of it feels like nostalgia. So much of it is what I want the character to be. It's my headcanon of the character, because looking at the character's actual publishing history, there are a lot of moments, there are a lot of things that I like about the character, but looking at her long established history, I don't know if there are many runs that I would point to and say that a classic run, and maybe it's just because I haven't read enough. When I think of great runs of Batman or other characters, I can point to entire years worth of stories from the Bronze Age or the Chromium Age or the more recent times, and I can't do that with Wonder Woman. I can point to more selective, smaller aspects, even like individual stories or small collections. But it does feel like she doesn't have as much of, I don't want to say she gets a pass, but a lot of love and forgiveness is she's given the benefit of the doubt because of her iconic symbolic and historic status. Not necessarily because of the quality of her stories, at least that I have read, but I still really like her. She's one of those characters that I think always needs to be at the forefront of DC. I want them to keep trying to push her, even though I think she is a complicated character to handle. She's more symbolic than she is anything else.
Broadcasting live from the Invisible Jet, this is Radio Free Themyscira.
The nation needs Wonder Woman.
On Paradise Island, home of the eternally young and beautiful Amazon.
Wonder Woman.
Athena, give me strength.
Who knows she has the strength of Hercules?
But Themyscira.
Who knows she has the wisdom of Athena?
Women are the ways of the future. And sisterhood is stronger than anything.
Princess Diana, the Wonder Woman.
Radio Free Themyscira, coming soon to Patriarch's World.
What is your favorite of the amazing Amazon's abilities or attributes? Good grief. I think that sentence needs a little more alliteration.
Ooh. Does that include her weapons or her accoutrement, or just her physical abilities?
All encompassing.
I have to say the lasso of truth. Maybe that was a little cliche, but I think having a lasso of truth, that's awesome. But at the same time, very intimidating because a lot of people are not equipped to handle the truth. I personally always want to be invisible because, I'm extremely shy, but who doesn't want to know what all the people is actually thinking? From not just Wonder Woman, for a lot of the superheroes, to have a lasso of truth, I think that's pretty awesome.
For me, the part of Wonder Woman's abilities that I always liked the most were the bracelets, because they seemed so unique to me. It was something that was compact and with her at all times, and yet she was able to use it defensively or offensively, and it was just so unique. There was nothing else like it really with any other character. It seemed very versatile, and I always liked the bracelets the best.
Gosh.
I love all of the accoutrement she has, her utilities, if you will. The bulletproof bracelets, the lasso, the invisible jet, and then if you get into the Golden Age, the telepathic phone. What was it?
Well, she had the tiara that could contact the robot plane. Is that what you're talking about? Or
no, there was the mental radio.
Mental radio.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you.
God,
I would definitely choose her use of the lasso of truth. When she uses it, she looks so skilled and so much like a cool cowgirl in action. And it's neat to me that I think it's connected to her creator who helped invent the lie detector. So I really like that connection about the lasso of truth and the lie detector. And I also love it when she uses the lasso to change her costume. The idea of that and the look of that when she does it is great. So that's a favorite of mine.
It's got to be bullets and bracelets. That's just such a unique power for her. It's such a vivid image that you can have that in recent years when she's started to use a shield or maybe even become bulletproof and invulnerable, I think it robs her of what can really be a dynamic image and something that is special to her character. I can picture in my head multiple panels of different artists who have portrayed that in a way. There's a Brian Boland cover, I think, for Wonder Woman 0 in the 0 Hour event where it's just her with bullets flying off of them. I can picture an image from Howard Porter's JLA run where he did multiple arms as after images showing how fast she would need to move to do what she was doing. Those images are just always so vivid to me that I wish that they would play that up more. It seems like a forgotten power within the last several years. What do you think?
I like the lasso of truth. The fact that it's non-lethal. Sometimes she relies on it a bit too much, kind of like Doctor Who's sonic screwdriver, but it can be used a whole lot more creatively than a gun or a sword.
It's a really subtle thing, but I think somebody played up on it in more recent, I don't know if it was in Greg Rucka's run or the Perez or Byrne run before that, but this idea that beyond the lasso of truth, it's almost impossible to lie to Wonder Woman. Just being in her presence makes you want to be truthful and just makes you want to be better and more sincere. And that's something about the character that I like, and I would like to see that played up, that When she walks in the room, you feel changed. And then, of course, I do like the physical things, like the strength and everything like that. Those are good. I don't want her at Superman's level, but she's comparable to a Captain America type.
Robert Greenberger wrote for the August 2000 cover-dated Millennium Edition Wonder Woman #1, a feminist superhero for young male readers, a hero based in Greek mythology who is also a red, white, and blue wearing patriot, an emissary of peace who must battle to defend others. Although these contradictions sum up what Wonder Woman was all about when she first appeared in 1941 in the pages of All-Star Comics #8, none of them say that above all else, she was created to be a role model. The brainchild of William Moulton Marston, Wonder Woman was created in response to what he perceived to be a lack of strong female characters in comic books. In the process, Marston created a legend. Along with Superman and Batman, Wonder Woman remains the only character in comics to be published continuously from the Golden Age to today. Marston was a well-regarded writer on pop culture and a prominent psychologist who is best remembered today as a key developer of the lie detector. His relationship with comics began when he wrote an overview of the subject for Family Circle magazine. Shortly after the article was published, All-American Comics publisher MC Gaines invited Marston to submit any ideas he might have for a new hero. Writing under the pen name Charles Moulton, Marston made one unforgettable contribution to comics, Wonder Woman, whose adventures he wrote until his death in 1947. Clearly, MC Gaines had high hopes for this new heroine. Wonder Woman's appearance in All-Star Comics #8 was followed immediately by her debut as the lead feature in Sensation Comics #1, January 1942. By that summer, she had already earned her own quarterly solo title. She even had a syndicated newspaper strip that ran from 1944 to 1945. Marston used his training as a psychologist to write stories that were more modern-day fairy tales and superheroic adventures. Wonder Woman may not have had a Dudley Rogues gallery, but she did have a colorful cast of supporting characters, including Etta Candy and the Holiday Girls. Although Wonder Woman was ostensibly based on Greek mythology, Marston played with the legends, using the names of the Greek gods but few of their characteristics. Still, he appended the Greek legend of the Amazons, giving them Paradise Island as a haven where they trained as warriors to preserve world peace. Princess Diana was to be the Amazons' envoy to the turbulent world of men. While she kept the peace in America, she also doubled as Diana Prince. Aiding Marston was artist Harry G. Peter, who had already enjoyed a successful career as a magazine illustrator. Peter's work seemed based more in fantasy than in adventure. He continued with the feature until retiring in the 1950s. Now let's take a look at the January 1942 cover-dated Sensation Comics #1. Like the crash of thunder from the sky comes Wonder Woman to save the world from the hatreds of men in a man-made world. Who is Wonder Woman? Why does she fight for America? To find the answer, let us go back to that mysterious Amazon isle called Paradise Island. Having won the right to return the yet unconscious and bedridden Captain Trevor back to his home country to complete his mission, the Amazon maiden named Diana flew across the ocean in her silent, transparent plane. Trevor briefly stirred and saw Diana as a beautiful angel smiling at him. Diana was already smitten, and the compliment was well received. Landing in Washington, D.C., Diana hid her transparent plane in a barn, then swiftly carried Steve Trevor on foot to Walter Reed Hospital. Diana informed the staff that the captain was with Army intelligence, then fled the scene. Now what do I do with my time? Mother told me so much about styles of American women that I'm dying to see them. Diana began window shopping, but was called a brazen thing and a hussy with no clothes on by a pair of old maids. A male onlooker chided, "Ha! Sour grapes, sister. Don't you wish you'd look like that?" He wasn't the only man taking in the view, as Diana attracted a lot of attention from both genders. Suddenly, screams and gunshots filled the air as robbers raced from a holdup. Diana leapt across the street to stand between the bandits and their car. When the hoods began firing on her, the Amazon deflected all their shots with her swift bracelets. "It's fun to be playing bullets and bracelets again." Diana continued the games, playing catch. Diana's hand clamped around the wrist of a burly thug like a steel vise, disarming him before flinging him at his partners like a sack of potatoes. The police arrived, and although Diana didn't quite know what a holdup was, her foot on the mound of thieves suggested she was aware her right had made might. The coppers had questions, but some other time when I'm on the Quiz Kids program. Clearly the Amazons were not so isolated that they couldn't be taught sarcasm through the magic sphere. An opportunist chased Diana down in his car as she raced from the scene. 35, 60, even 80 miles per hour wasn't enough to quite keep up, but Diana was convinced to stop by a shouted business proposition. "My name is Al Kale. I book acts for theaters. Now I don't know what your racket is and I don't care. All I know is that those speedy legs of yours and that bullet trick could net a fortune." Diana realized she would need money, and she still had to kill time till Steve recovers, so she agreed with a handshake. Bullets and Bracelets was a hit with audiences, selling out the Bijou Theater. The entertainment press dubbed Wonder Woman a smash, at least according to the Daily Blade. Kale wanted to carry on, but once the papers reported that Captain Trevor was finally recovered from his brain concussion, Diana lost interest. Unable to hold her without a contract, Kale tried to steal all the show's earnings for himself. Diana caught on quick, jumping from a fifth-story window to catch and hold Kale's car by the bumper. Wonder Woman left Kale dangling from a telephone pole while she reclaimed her share of the loot. The next day, Diana found a nurse crying on the steps outside the hospital. "Today, my fiancé just got a job in South America, but he can't send for me because his salary is too small." Diana was sympathetic, but couldn't help but notice how much she resembled the nurse with her glasses off. Diana offered to buy the nurse's credentials and identity in exchange for money enough to start her new life in South America. That way, both could stay with the men they loved. And no harm done, for I'm a trained nurse too. In an amazing coincidence, the nurse was named Diana Prince, and you'd better remember that last name, because it'll be yours from now on. Steve was still calling out for his beautiful angel in his sleep as the disguised Diana tended to him. Woman. Steve liked Nurse Prince well enough, but he had things to do and snuck out of the hospital. The doctor blamed the nurse for allowing Trevor to escape, as overexertion might kill the captain. Nurse Diana Prince managed to deduce Trevor's whereabouts from a newspaper article about a threat to bomb Camp Merrick with a new poison gas, and uncovered her transparent plane. Inside the barn, the girl transforms herself from drab Diana Prince to the exciting Amazon maiden, Wonder Woman. It felt grand to be herself again. Captain Trevor reported to his commanding officer, and patrols were set up to look out for the bomber. But Steve knew that wouldn't be enough. Captain Trevor looked to the air and was confronted by a flying fort his plane's guns couldn't even dent. Trevor's only recourse was to crash his plane into the bomber, which did the trick, but his ripped chute seemed likely to spell his end. However, Wonder Woman was also on the scene, and setting her robot control pilot, managed to catch Trevor in midair while dangling from a ladder. Steve was pleased to be reacquainted with his beautiful angel, or as Diana put it, a guardian angel is more like it. An enemy pilot parachuted to safety, but caught the Amazon's eye, so Diana had Steve fly her toward the foe. The pilot tried firing on her, but bracelets and a sock to the jaw settled any argument. The pilot was fatally wounded during the crash, but declared more bombers would succeed where he failed. Trevor expected as much, having once found the enemy's secret base, which had been moved during his convalescence. Good thing I anticipated this and had Mother look up this secret base in the Magic Sphere before I left Paradise Island. The pair landed at a secret island base, then ambushed a guard patrol. Wonder Woman then burst through a wooden door and tossed about half of it at the first soldier to get in her way. Steve passed Diana a gas mask, then fired a canister of poison. The enemy was dying in numbers, but their leader tried to take the heroes with them to the great beyond through an explosion. Wonder Woman easily got clear, but Steve was buried under debris and had to be saved yet again. Are you hurt, Steve? Why didn't you jump like I did? Jump like you? What am I, a kangaroo? Trevor's leg was broken, so back to the hospital he went. Both the doctor and the general congratulated Steve's magnificent work, but he insisted a beautiful angel was responsible. Wonder Woman. Nurse Prince questioned Steve about his delirious talk, but Trevor was adamant in his admiration for Wonder Woman. Prince tried to point out that Trevor was in her care now, but Steve let her down semi-gently, as no regular woman could hold a candle to his new flame. So I'm my own rival, huh? That's funny. If Mother could only see me now, as a very feminine woman, a nurse no less, in a world full of men, and in love too, with myself for a rival. And so ends the first full episode of Wonder Woman, alias Diana Prince, Army Nurse. Follow her exciting adventures as she bests the world's most villainous men at their own game every month in Sensation Comics. My best guess at the local paper's name was the Daily Blade, but the calligraphy on the second word was pretty rough, so I'm open to other interpretations. It might as well have been the Daily Bugle, because I found it amazing how this spectacular tale seemed more like Spider-Man's origin than how most people recall Wonder Woman's. I loved revisiting the story because it really put the lie to the naive take on the character. Diane is an educated woman who drops pop culture references and recognizes the need for scratch in her mission to man's world and waiting to indulge a missionary with a worldly man. Maybe the reason no one can sell Wonder Woman is because they don't bother to go back to the one era where she had a wide comic book audience and realizes she's been mischaracterized for 60 years. Unlike most Golden Age heroes, Diana has yet to escape the shadow of Dr. Frederick Wortham to return to Dr. William Moulton Marston's original interpretation. By the way, now that the two-part origin is complete, did you notice the absence of an essential element? While creators have tried to bury the invisible plane since the mid-80s, even though it's prominent from the first full story, Wonder Woman won't begin using a lasso until Sensation Comics number 6. Occasionally dubbed, Wonder Woman Arrives in Man's World. This untitled story was by William Moulton Marston and Harry G. Peter. This issue of Sensation Comics also featured the origins of Wildcat and Mr. Terrific.
Okay, what is your favorite version or aspect of her origin story, and why do you prefer it?
I don't have a very strong opinion on this one because so many aspects of the origin stories blur together in my mind, but the parts that really stick out the most to me would be Steve Trevor crashing onto Paradise Island and the competition being held to determine who will return him to the outside world, and I loved how Diana disguised herself to be part of the competition, so I really enjoyed that part of the story, and that's what's core to me in my memory.
I like what they did in the 2009 animated movie. It's her classic origin, but she doesn't immediately fall in love with Steve just because he's the first guy she's ever seen. Instead, she's hostile towards him at first, because, she's been told her whole life men are evil, but as time goes by, she actually gets to know him and comes to respect him as an ally.
I'm not a big fan of she just happens to run into her doppelganger named Diana Prince, who happens to be a military nurse at the base that Steve Trevor's at, who wants to disappear, because that all seems just a little bit too contrived. I would have rather that somehow she came up with this identity on her own and was able to sort of pull all of that together. That part just seems like a little bit too easy for me.
Yeah, they talk about she's eager to prove herself and to go to the outside world, for which is understandable if you are kept in captivity, but it doesn't give me a very in-depth description of how she is.
The summer 1942 cover dated Wonder Woman number 1 featured an expanded version of the origins of the Amazons and Wonder Woman herself. The text material from All-Star Comics number 8 was more fully rendered in a comic book format and explained that the crux of the conflict that created created the Amazons was between Ares, god of war, who had decreed that men shall rule with the sword, and Aphrodite, goddess of love. My women shall conquer men with love. We actually get to see the first version of Hercules in Wonder Woman comics, wearing a lion's skull and mane as his helmet, and featuring such swollen, overwrought musculature that he makes the 90s proud 50 years ahead of time. In this story, we see Hippolyte initially defeat Hercules, then fall to his trickery, then defeat him once again, before sailing on ships to the Paradise Isle. Here ends the ancient history of the Amazons as told in the parchment Wonder Woman left. Relying on later sources of information, we shall continue the story of the beginnings of Wonder Woman. The Queen, under direction of Athena, goddess of wisdom, learns the secret art of molding a human form. Hippolyte adores the tiny statue she has made as Pygmalion-worshipped Galatea. Aphrodite, granting the Queen her prayer, bestows upon it the divine gift of life. I name thee Diana, after the moon goddess, mistress of the chase. Baby Diana, to her mother's astonishment, leaps high into the Queen's arms. How marvelous! She is my little wonder child. At 3, the Wonder Child pulls up a fruit tree by its roots. Great thunderbolts of Zeus! She pulls that tree up like a weed. Already our little princess has the strength of Hercules. At 5, Diana, like her namesake, the goddess of the chase, races deer through the forest. The Queen's child is swifter than Mercury. At 15, the young Amazon girl receives her bracelets of submission at Aphrodite's altar. I pledge myself forever to thy service, O goddess of love and beauty. Drink, Diana, from the fountain of eternal youth. Beauty and happiness are your Amazon birthright, so long as you remain on Paradise Island. It is a wonderful birthright. I'll never give it up. The tale continues into the more familiar narrative from Sensation Comics #1 about the crash landing of Steve Trevor, but expands upon it to reveal that Diana created the famous purple healing ray specifically to save the life of Steve Trevor, but also enlivens Wonder Woman's mission to man's world as part of a grander conflict of the gods. Ares, alternately known as Mars in the story, gloats, "Ho ho! The whole world's at war! I rule the earth!" A defiant Aphrodite replied, "Your rule will end when America wins, and America will win. I'll send an Amazon to help her. A young Amazon must take the captain back to America. She must remain there to fight war and evil. Select your mightiest maiden, for she will need all her strength." And so it goes.
I really am a big fan of the clay statue part, which, of course, it was not part of the Azzarello Chang run. Part of it, because I think, is that it really completely makes her unique. It's obviously, she came to life out of the sheer amount of love that Hippolyta had, which I think is really a wonderful part of that story. It explains why she could be a child on Paradise Island in all of the different incarnations. And I think that it allows authors to have a little bit of wiggle room in terms of how she got her powers, why she is the best of all of the Amazons, because she really isn't just an Amazonian warrior that's been trained. She's really something special. And that's, believe it or not, part of one of the things that I really disliked about the New 52 run, because they made her a demigod, and we've read many stories of many demigods, and so I felt like pigeonholed her into a certain power level, if that makes sense.
I hate the idea that she is the bastard daughter of Zeus and Hippolyta, or Hercules and Hippolyta, or anybody else. I've always liked that idea that she was molded out of clay or out of sand, or somehow that she was willed into existence by the love of her mother and the gifts of these gods. It made her special, and it made her not the product of a man's libido in one way or another. The idea that she might have been conceived through a rape or through just Zeus whoring himself around, I hate that idea. And when they've played into that in the recent comics, and the idea that they might do that in the movies, that just it makes me want to spit. But that classic idea that a mother could love this idea so much and so purely that didn't really exist, that she was a sort of virginal birth, if you want to get into more of a Judeo-Christian idea of it, or even this manifestation of her love, that the gods saw this and said, yeah, you deserve this daughter, and we're going to give it to you, and it's going to be special, and she has all of these things. I've always just really liked that idea because it makes her special, and it gives her a sense of alienness and disconnection from humanity that you can play into to different levels, and it doesn't have to be a weird cultural thing like she doesn't know what ice cream is. It can play into the fact that there's something about her that who is she on the inside? Can she actually lead a human life? Or was she, and again, using a sort of a Christ figure, was she created simply to bring peace to this world? And she's not meant to have the same experiences that a normal woman would have, and that she's not meant to fall in love and get married and have that normal life. That by leaving Paradise Island, this place where the women never age and never die, when she leaves that island, when she takes her foot off of that sand, sort of like the field of dreams, once they leave, they can't go back. And once she embarks on this quest to bring peace to man's world, it's a suicide mission, and it's a mission that she's not going to come back from. And that ultimately is why Hippolyta tries to stop it. That's why she doesn't want to say goodbye to her daughter. She doesn't want her daughter to go out and become a woman and have these adult encounters, but she also knows that she's sending her daughter into a world from which she might not come back. Part of this idea, it's a weird image to jump on, but when I think of the Alex Ross, Jim Kruger book Justice, there's a fight scene in that between Wonder Woman and Cheetah, where Wonder Woman gets scratched by Cheetah's claws. The magic in her claws, this curse, you just see that she's not bleeding. Instead, it's like she's boiling under. There's a fire. If you imagine that Wonder Woman is made of clay, that there's just this furnace, this kiln inside her, boiling and baking the clay inside, and that's what happens to her when she gets scratched. I like that image, and for some reason that seemed to reinforce this idea that she's not an alien from another planet, but she's not human either. And it's not because she's a goddess or something like that. It's because it's a weird word to use for somebody, this iconic woman of beauty, but she's a golem.
Black Canary.
I'll need a sparring partner.
I'm Zatanna. What do you care about some leggy dame in nylons? Or have I answered my own question? Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for magic.
Black Canary and Zatanna, together in one podcast. I'm Ryan Daly, and I've got a thing for superheroes in fishnet stockings. That's why I started Power of Fishnets, the Black Canary and Zatanna podcast. Join me every 2 weeks as I celebrate the Blonde Bombshell and the Mistress of Magic in their exciting adventures published by DC Comics. Power of Fishnets, available on iTunes and at fireandwaterpodcast.com.
Do you like Wonder Woman's costume?
Come on.
I do. There are obviously different minor variations of it. I don't mind the super early image of it being more like stars on a skirt, but I've never been a big fan of the pants. I've always thought that her costume is obviously so iconic these days that it has to be the bathing suit look. I don't mind nowadays some people put the Greek leather strap skirt around to give her a little bit more modesty in this day and age, but I can't deal with the long pants.
Do I like women showing almost his entire body? For men, I'll have to say no. I do understand that they cannot have Wonder Woman like fully dressed and stuff like that. Well, yeah, why not? They can just have like a regular Wonder Woman. What? She has to be all naked, like a huge boobs? But I'm pretty sure that's a very typical question for a lot of women that feel like that and that feel the way I feel, that we're all supposed to be respected. And I don't want to sound like, oh, Islamic and stuff like that, to cover up and everything, but at least have like a little bit more, don't sexualize something that is not meant to be, you know.
See, that's a complicated question because, you know, she's had so many at this point. I do like the classic one with the briefs. Specifically, I'm very picky about how they draw her when they draw her with the regular costume without the pants, because some people draw her bottoms as actual, like, bottoms, you know, briefs. And then you get a lot of the artists, especially in the 90s, where the back of her briefs start creeping up and up and up until it turns into like a French cut thong instead of practical briefs. I like her costume when they do it right. Especially like right now where she has the war kilt on, gladiator style, in the new Rucka series.
It took me a while to get used to it, but yeah, I do. It's really iconic. Though I will say that design-wise, I prefer it with a skirt instead of the star-spangled undies. It just adds some much-needed length to the outfit, and I'm not opposed to shoulder straps either.
For Wonder Woman's costume, there's been so many over the years, but in particular, I like the pants or the leggings. I think that is a practical look for a superhero, and I like the effect of that. I didn't care for the Golden Age skirt, but I did like the more recent kind of Xena warrior princess style skirt. I thought that version of the skirt looked fine. But in general, what I really like most about the costume is the functionality of the bracelets and the tiara. I think those are practical, and I always think those are iconic aspects of her costume.
For me, the Wonder Woman costume, I've liked almost every iteration of it, I would say. And to me, there aren't really a lot of differences. They're usually more subtle. Like, for instance, with the crest, I like the crest if it's an eagle. I like the crest if it's a WW. I like the crest when it's a combination of the two. I was fine with the Golden Age skirt. The shorts are fine. But I must say that even though you see it the least and it's not generally most fans' favorite, I do also prefer Wonder Woman in pants because I think it looks the best, and I think it's the most practical. It makes the most sense to me that that's probably what her costume would really be.
Yes, I do, because I can see that costume anywhere and know exactly what it is, or I can see a version of it, or even something that just looks remotely similar to it and know, hey, that's Wonder Woman. So as an image, as an icon, absolutely. It's a transcendent costume. It has lasted for decades. I think it is almost as recognizable as Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, and those type of things. So for that reason, well, yes. I don't always like the way it's drawn. As I've grown older, I've liked less and less the skimpy thong-style underwear cut that she had post-crisis. I also don't necessarily like the bloomer shorts that she was wearing in the 50s. I like the skirt, and I think there's a way... Well, actually, in the movie, I think making it almost Trojan Greco armor style skirt, I think that actually works. I wish the color scheme was a little brighter and a little bit more vibrant, but the cut of the movie costume, I think, works. I could also see it something like a tennis player skirt. Look at what Venus and Serena Williams wear, and have that type of skirt affect something on the costume. I think any of those things could work. It's a costume that you can play around with as long as you don't get too far afield from what everybody recognizes as the icon. I think the same is true with Batman. You can make some tweaks and some alterations to the symbol and to the look and everything. As long as you don't go crazy, everybody's going to look at that and know that's Wonder Woman. So yes, I do like the costume.
Returning to Robert Greenberger's comments from the Wonder Woman #1 Millennium Edition, after Morrison's death, writer Robert Kanigher took over, chronicling Wonder Woman's adventures for close to 20 years, along the way introducing supporting characters including Wonder Girl, Wonder Baby, Merboy, and Bird Boy. He was joined in the late 1950s by the art teams of Ross Andrew and Mike Esposito. In the April 1959 cover dated Wonder Woman #105, Kanigher, Andrew, and Mike Esposito offered The Secret Origin of Wonder Woman. Who is Wonder Woman? Where did she come from? How did she obtain her invincible powers? So many times have these questions been asked that the time has come to release the answers to the clamoring public. Here then, for the very first time, is all the mystery and excitement, all the incredible adventures behind The Secret Origin of Wonder Woman, credited to Charles Moulton. Centuries ago, to the royal chamber of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, came a legendary visitor. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, had come to bestow a gift upon Hippolyta's infant daughter. I bequeath to you, Princess Diana, all the beauty of goodness, so that you may be one of the fairest of maids throughout the world. Next, Athena arrived, bequeathing to Princess Diana the wisdom of the planets. She was followed by Fleet Mercury, who looked over the cradle at Diana and dropped his helmet. By Jove's thunderbolt, did you see the speed with which she caught my helmet? I bequeath to her even greater speed than I myself possess. Next up was mighty Hercules. When he looked into the cradle, Diana grabbed him by the beard.
I tweaked my beard, did she? As if I were a mere mortal. I, Princess Diana, I. What better gift can I deed you than strength even greater than mine?
As the gods departed, Queen Hippolyta bade her daughter, "You will grow into a wonder, little one, a wonder girl, and you must always use your powers for justice." Then one bleak day, years later, terrible news. All the Amazons' men had been wiped out in the wars. All the women were left alone, including a teenage Diana, who, though teary-eyed, stayed brave for her mother in her time of tragedy. Queen Hippolyta ordered her Amazons to build a stout ship so that her women could sail away from these terrible wars. During the night, Queen Hippolyta looked in on her daughter, but found her missing. A search party was gathered, and guided by torchlight, they found a surprise. As with lightning speed, astounding strength, and dazzling skill, they see the young Amazon princess fashion a mighty ship single-handedly in one night. She is a wonder girl. The next day, the Amazon ship sets forth to find a secret island that could be home to the Amazons, so that they may live in peace. For days they traveled until the ship was imperiled by a giant whirlpool. Young Princess Princess Diana dove into the waters. With all the strength that mighty Hercules had bequeathed her, the Wonder Girl struggles to tow the ship past the titanic clutches of the frothing vortex. Finally, the fearful struggle is won, and a great cheer goes up as the young princess returns. Well done, daughter. All hail, Princess Diana. The Amazons sailed on, until they found themselves in waters that themselves were on fire. The Amazons tried to put out the blazes with the last of their drinking water. With incredible speed bequeathed her by Mercury, Wonder Girl streaked up to a mountaintop whose peaks were covered in snow and brought them down to quench the flames. Next, the Amazons sailed over a sea of gases. One by one, the Amazons drop off to sleep, overcome by the fumes. Finally, even the Queen herself falters. On sailed the doomed ship, her destiny and that of all aboard her in the hands of the Wonder Girl. Only Wonder Girl had the constitution to guide the ship to safety, and past the fumes, they found an island paradise. Why not call it Paradise Island, Mother, home of the Amazons? Athena appeared. You have passed through the mists of eternal youth. You will always remain as you are, provided you never leave this island. Princess Diana, you will grow to young womanhood, and will also remain that way, under the same condition, never to leave Paradise Island. Aided by the remarkable powers of Wonder Girl, an Amazon city takes shape. Many were the astounding feats performed by the Wonder Girl, of which we can only show a few, such as swimming up a waterfall, riding the mythological bird the roc. The education of the Amazon princess kept pace with her remarkable physical powers. She became versed in every language ever spoken, even caveman. Every science is made known to the girl Wonder. She can calculate complex mathematical formulas swiftly in her head. When a whale showed up to cause the Amazon some trouble, she just grabbed it by the tail and dragged it back out to sea. The advanced Amazon photographers were able to document many of Princess Diana's amazing feats, and her mother began a scrapbook. Thus begins one of the most legendary careers of all time. And from time to time, we shall invite you on other breathless tales of adventure with the unique Wonder Girl. As you likely already noticed, this was less a secret origin of Wonder Woman as Wonder Girl, and this was indeed her first appearance under that name. However, this story was the Amazons' official entry in the inaugural issue of Secret Origins in 1961. For the record, the first story of a grade school Diana was Wonder Woman and the Coming of the Kangas, from 1947's Wonder Woman number 23, likely one of the last stories written by William Moulton Marston. The Secret Origin was also a partial adaptation of Robert Kanigher and Harry G. Peters' The Wonder Woman story from 1951's Wonder Woman number 45. That tale contradicted Marston's by showing Diana receiving her bracelets at age 15 instead of as a younger child. Those were just minor tweaks to the Golden Age continuity, though. The first major revision by the Silver Age creative team of Robert Kanigher, Ross Andru, and Mike Esposito was in the May 1958 cover-dated Wonder Woman number 98 in a story titled The $1 Million Penny, Chapter 1, The Secret Amazon Trials. In ancient times, Amazons battled against evil forces who threatened peaceful people. Their astounding feats demoralized villains everywhere. When all was peaceful, the Amazons retired to their secret island home in the Pacific, reigned over by Queen Hippolyta. There she was entertained by her already adult daughter, Diana, already wearing the Wonder Woman costume, and showing off her extraordinary abilities, like soaring as gracefully as any bird on air currents, bounding greater than any Olympian, as light as a feather, balancing on a straight line of pebbles with her incredible agility. Then one day, Pallas Athena, patron goddess of the Amazons, appeared to the queen. Hippolyta, the time has come for you to choose the greatest of the Amazons. You must send her on a mission to man's world, to battle crime and injustice, and help people in distress. Only when her services are no longer needed can she think of herself. Hippolyta had to choose her champion, but it was obvious to her fellow Amazons that there was no way she could do that without pre-favoring her own daughter, Princess Diana. Diana knew that Orana was right to question her mother's impartiality, and so she came up with a plan. All the Amazons were dressed out to look like Wonder Woman. They're all in the same costume. They've all got black wigs to look like Diana, and that way the champion would be chosen without favoring her daughter. This is obviously one major divergence from most versions of the origin, in that Hippolyta would want to send her daughter as the champion of the Amazon people. And there are also a bunch of new contests. For instance, there's a dirigible that the Amazons are fighting over in a tug of war that's mass of ropes. One side falters and they all have to start ripping off their Diana masks, and her mother is pleased to see that the real Diana is still eligible in the contest. Then all the Wonder Women have to try to ride some rapids on logs. Many of them fall, among the first of them Diana. This race has bested me. Shades of Pluto, I lose. However, so did pretty much all the other Wonder Women, and Princess Diana was actually able to recover, and was one of two that remained at the end of the contest. Finally, two women are up on a tightrope high above the other Amazons who watch them fight. One falls from the high wires and unable to grab it before she continues her descent. She also looks pretty precarious, like she might hit the ground in such a way that would do her great harm. The remaining Amazon leaps from the high wire, scoops up the fallen Amazon, and lands her on ground safely. Hola! What a catch! And sure enough, this savior Amazon was the true Wonder Woman, Princess Diana. And then there's some weird random adventure involving a penny and going to the United States. I'm not going to get into all that. This story is a bone of contention for a lot of people, especially ones that didn't know of a different origin, in that it kind of invalidates the contest because it's established between these two origin stories. The Wonder Woman had abilities far, far outstripping outstripping those of the other Amazons. It'd be like a contest between Superman and the citizens of Smallville. What's the point? I personally don't have a problem with the gods being involved in blessing the role of Wonder Woman. Like it's a title that could be won, and having won that title, you would get those powers. I do have issue with Wonder Woman having powers beyond those of everybody else that she works with. It doesn't work to have this one Wonder Woman running around bullying everybody else. Not intentionally, obviously she has very good intentions, but because the contest is such an important part of her origin, it has to be a fair contest. And also just all these people running around doing Wonder Woman cosplay is just goofy as heck.
Greetings, sisters. This is Angela from Wonder Woman Warrior for Peace. Beautiful as Aphrodite. Wise as Athena. Stronger than Hercules. Swifter than Mercury. Explore the 75-year history of the Amazon princess with Wonder Woman Warrior for Peace, a monthly podcast available on iTunes, Stitcher, and at wonderwomanwarriorforpeace.wordpress.com. If you want to hear more from me as I recap and review Wonder Woman's history from the pre-crisis, post-crisis, New 52, and 70s TV show, you can check out my monthly podcast, Wonder Woman Warrior for Peace, available on iTunes and Stitcher, and at wonderwomanwarriorforpeace.wordpress.com. Thank you.
You told me you'd read a Secret Origins digest story, right?
Yeah.
Was that your first experience with her origin?
I think that it's either the first or the second. I can remember I grew up in a very, very small town, and we had a very small library in that town. But one of the books they had was sort of a hardcover book that had origins of the superheroes, the DC superheroes. So it had the first Earth 2 Green Lantern story and then the Earth 1 Green Lantern story. And so I may have read a Wonder Woman one there. But the one that I remember best as sort of like, oh, this is truly, I recall all of the elements of it and it's fleshed out, was in one of the DC Blue Ribbon Digest Secret Origins of the Superheroes, which I have the copy in my hand right now, came out in 1979, so I would have been 9 years old. And that did the whole part about the foundation of Paradise Island, Hercules taking over, Trevor landing on the island, the contest, coming to America, taking over the Diana Prince identity. That's really the first time that I can remember seeing all of those elements together.
So that was DC Special Series 19. It was Kerry Burkett, Jose Delbo, and Vince Coletta?
That's right.
I read through that one real quick last night, and I noticed a few little tweaks that they had done that was different from other origins. They had Amazonia established as being on the Black Sea, which I'm not sure if I remember being anyplace else besides in that story. And then it's funny because it seems like they're trying to streamline it, sort of like when they're doing an adaptation for film where they try to get rid of as many characters as possible and consolidate. But then they have this offhand reference to Hippolyta's sister Antiope dying. Why was that in there? And they also made it to where it was Hippolyta's choice to go and live isolated from all mankind, which was, I think, a new thing that I hadn't seen in the other origins before.
I agree with all of that. I was pretty surprised at how big Aphrodite is. I just repurchased this digest a year ago, and I can remember looking at that and saying, boy, I thought more of the Pantheon was involved than just her.
Well, they did have this little 2-page thing at the back end that sort of obliquely references one of the Silver Age origins that Rob Kanigher had done. He might have even written that one. It shows the various gods, Hercules and Mercury showing up and giving their powers to Diana, but it's told in such a weird way. I don't know if that would even be clear to a new reader what they were doing there with that, because it's just this little weird, quick 2-page deal at the back end of that story.
Yeah, as I'm looking through, they say above that 2-page thing, beautiful as Aphrodite, wise as Athena, stronger than Hercules, and swifter than Mercury, and then it goes into all of those four. But I don't think those words are anywhere in the origin story to let us know that she indeed has all of those powers.
Yeah,
so I agree with you that would kind of seem a little bit out of place if this really was the first time that you read her origin.
They're selling it as the gods that are worshipped by the Amazons, and so you got a panel with Hercules and so on and so forth, and they're talking about the gifts they're bestowing, but you don't have a frame of reference for what they're doing until this last panel on the right-hand page, and even that's not really clear that this is part of the origin story.
Correct. In the story, they show her doing things with her, like she's stronger than Hercules, but it's not that bestowing upon her that power that we get to see.
Allow me to interject for just a moment. Angie and I talked a lot about how strong of a role Aphrodite had in this telling of the story, and we both thought that was strange, but as I've been researching for this podcast, virtually all of the tellings of Wonder Woman's origin prior to the 1980s vastly emphasized the role of Aphrodite. It was actually a bit like the biblical story of Job, where Mars was the hateful being who wants to destroy mankind, but most especially womankind, and at one point even mocks Aphrodite's tears. You're supposed to be a goddess goddess, but you look like a mortal because you're crying. And Aphrodite empowers and shepherds the Amazons to show Mars the value of womankind. So the involvement of a whole pantheon of gods is actually more of a modern revision, with the exception of those gods bestowing their powers upon Wonder Woman, which goes back to the 50s. Then we moved on to the coincidence of Princess Diana finding a woman who was her near duplicate, who happened to have the name Diana Prince, and a vocation that would perfectly allow Princess Diana to be close with the ailing Steve Trevor. In reading the story you're referencing, the DC Special story, it was funny, they managed to get a little fan tweak in there where they pointed out that Diana thought that one of the goddesses, or Aphrodite herself, had made that happen because it was too much of a coincidence to happen serendipitously.
Yeah, it's a nice line that I guess allows you to say, okay, I have a better reason than luck for all of this to happen.
What do you think of Wonder Woman with a shield or cape?
Oh, good question. I think the cape looks nice, so I like that for some variety. Very visually appealing to me. And I would say the shield, I really don't see there's much of a need for it because of the bracelets. So to me, it just seems like something big and bulky to have to carry around. So why not just use the bracelets instead? Would like to see the cape occasionally and just leave the shield aside.
Once again, cape. I mean, one of the most iconic things. Superhero has to have a cape. Kids is like, I want to be a superhero. Just put a towel on their back and they feel like, I mean, the cape has something special powers. The cape can do something like the invisibility cloak in Harry Potter. If not, I mean, it can use shield with the cape.
She's occasionally worn a cape. It usually resembles her briefs, where it's a blue cape with white stars, and it doesn't do anything special. It just makes her look more regal.
So it's like a useless, just another piece of cloak that can get caught when she's fighting or stuff. So it's not practical. So I don't care. As far as a shield, I thought that her bracelets have some kind of like a shield power.
In the original comics, they were made of Amazonium, which was basically a prototype for adamantium. It was a mystical metal that was created by the Amazons that was stronger than virtually anything in the universe. So they had all kinds of special properties. They could deflect energy. They could deflect projectiles. And of course, the Amazons were so fast they could actually deflect bullets with them.
Okay. I think that I would prefer her having their own bracelet. I thought that the bracelet sounds pretty cool. So why you want to give her a shield? I mean, just leave her with the bracelet because that's an iconic thing of her. And she doesn't have to be like carrying this cumbersome piece of metal. You just have the bracelets, practical, good, and they do the same thing. And it sounds like they're awesome. So I don't see why she needs to have a shield.
The shield, hate it. If she's got a shield, that's usually in one hand, and she's got a sword or an axe in the other hand, and I don't like that. I don't think she needs the shield. That's the reason she's got the bracelets. The whole thing, that's part of that origin story. In the first story, that's part of their test. That's the final test that says she is the champion. She is the greatest of the Amazons. She can go out there and stop this war and bring peace to man's world. And she can do it by deflecting bullets with these bracelets. Yes, and that was maybe the only part I liked about Batman vs. Superman, is when she actually locks her wrists in that X formation and blocks Doomsday's heat vision or whatever with those bracelets. Yes, fist pump, that's the way to do it. And then you look at the trailer for her own damn movie and you got these soldiers in World War I firing a machine gun at her and she's blocking it with a shield. Put the damn shield down. Use your glam, your bling. I hate the shield. There's no need for it. It's Captain America's thing. Leave Captain America his thing. The cape, it's as a sort of ceremonial thing, like if she's walking into an embassy or if she's like meeting like a group for some sort of diplomatic mission or something, I can see her wearing that. I don't have a problem with it, but not in battle. No, not in battle at all.
Not a fan of the cape. I like capes when they fit with the costume's design, like, say, with Huntress or Power Girl, but with Wonder Woman, it's just kind of unnecessary clutter. And what is the point of the shield? That's what the bracelets are for.
Oh, definitely not a cape. Definitely not a cape. We've talked about sort of the bullets and the bracelets part of things. I think that DC has sort of adopted this sword and shield look for her, whether that's because of the popularity of 300 or the grim and gritty new take on superheroes that they've tried to shove down our throats. But I'm not a big fan of it, and I think it's just a little bit Cap's deal, and it's also the Guardian's deal, I guess, in the DC universe, and she's got the bracelets, right? That should be what she needs. So I'm not a big fan of the shield. I'm not a big fan fan of the short sword either, and definitely not a cape.
Well, I will say that for me, I always have liked capes. They look visually appealing, very artistic. You can do lots of things with them. So when Wonder Woman is wearing a cape, I think that looks fine. But I wouldn't want to see it regularly. It's not an iconic part of her character, in my opinion, so I wouldn't want to see it all the time. But on occasion, it's nice. As far as the shield, though, I'm definitely not a fan of the shield because I don't think there's any need for it. Again, I mentioned earlier how much I am a fan of her bracelets, and I think they're unique. I think they serve the same purpose as a shield, and I think writers and artists should use that unique aspect of Wonder Woman instead of giving her a shield, because with her shield and with her costume, she ends up looking like a female Captain America.
I like them when they use them, not really sparingly, but in specific occasions. Especially the cape I like whenever she's doing like the ambassadorial things. And the shield always looks cool, especially when you can tell like when she grabs that shield out, that stuff's going down, you know? She's about to fight something big. I like them both.
Trekker Talk, a fan podcast devoted to the adventures of 23rd century bounty hunter Mercy St. Clair from the pages of Trekker Comics by creator, writer, and artist Ron Randall. I'm Darren.
And I'm Ruth. We'll be discussing the stories, characters, and art in this excellent retro sci-fi adventure series, as well as having side conversations about other areas of fandom.
We hope you'll join us as we travel from the dangerous back streets of New Galuf to the depths of outer space and everywhere in between.
Trekker Talk is available at podbean.com and on iTunes and Stitcher.
Find us at trekkertalk.com.
Of the different origin stories that have been told, I think my favorite presentation is the classic Golden Age. And it's sort of split between Sensation Comics 1 and Wonder Woman #1, because I think Wonder Woman #1 develops it and explores it a little bit more. It's really clean, straightforward. The first one in Sensation Comics, there's a lot of text in that one. There's a couple of pages that are basically just prose written down with accompanying pictures, because they needed to do a lot to explain the entire history of Paradise Island, which is why George Perez's first issue of Wonder Woman was so dense and so big. It was an oversized issue.
Oh, yeah. There were no ads. You're talking about 12 panels per page on a lot of that stuff. And 14 panels per page. It was crazy.
There's a lot to get into when you talk about her origin story. I think that's why it scares some people. It makes her a difficult character to handle. Like, I mean, Krypton explodes on the first page. You get it. The Thomas and Martha Wayne killed the first page. You get it. Wonder Woman, you need to lay a lot of groundwork to explain where she comes from. But I think the original one did it very cleanly, very simply. There was less of the sense that the women of Paradise Island had been dominated and abused by men. Like I said, it was a little bit less rapey, so that's the version that I think can still translate pretty well into a modern story, I think.
I'd argue that the Marston origins feel more like a seduction and a betrayal as opposed to an outright rape.
No, I definitely think you need the idea that Hippolyta beat Hercules in battle, and then he seduced her and they were fooling around. They slept together, and then through that he was able to take the girdle and everything and punished her, and she learned a lesson that way.
Robert Greenberger wrote in the May 2000 cover-dated Millennium Edition Wonder Woman #1, for a brief period in the late 1960s, editor-artist Mike Sekowsky remade Diana in the image of TV's Diana Rigg. The moment Sekowsky left the book, though, this new direction was jettisoned, and Wonder Woman became a more standard, if not terribly interesting, superhero adventure book. By the mid-1980s, when the DC Universe was officially rebooted in Crisis on Infinite Earths, it became apparent that the company's big three characters, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, needed some refreshing as well. 30,000 BC. Today your tribe cast you out. They mocked you, called you useless, called you an animal. Only yesterday you were called a man. You hunted with men and fought with men. That was before you met the Sabretooth, the one who bested you, the one who took your hand. Now you are a man no more. For men are hunters, and hunters need hands. That makes you afraid, but you must not show your fear. Remember what the tribe teaches. Fear is for women, so you hide your face, quell your trembling. Still, somehow, she knows. And when she touches you, when you hear her sympathetic whining, you curse her. So you pull away, but she insists. You try to ignore her, but her whimpering taunts you. teases you, emasculates you, makes you snap. And when your temper cools, when the echo of her scream has been swallowed by the air, you hear it, a muffled stirring within her, and a voice, as if from the earth itself, whispering, calling, beckoning, making something happen that you cannot understand. And it makes you want to scream. The first woman to be slain at the remaining hand of a precursor to man took her unborn child with her into the afterlife. 1200 BC. In a hearing with Zeus, Artemis pleaded for blessing to create a new race of warrior women in order to lead mankind in devoted worship to the Greek pantheon. Ares argued the ladies were babbling fools, their plan lunacy, and that he should instead be allowed to go down to earth and force everyone into submission.
Force is all men understand. Force is all they worship. And I am force incarnate.
Only Apollo openly sides with the advocating goddesses. Zeus left the trifling matter to others and the meeting in a huff, while Hera washed her hands of all of it to avoid raising her husband's ire. With neither Zeus's grace nor forbiddance, Artemis, Athena, Demeter, Hestia, and Aphrodite pressed on. Hermes carried the goddesses to Hades, where they were ferried by Charon to the Cavern of Souls. It is the womb of Gaia, mother of us all. The swirling tornado of lost souls within were released to rain down on the earth, save for one with a special destiny to come. From out of water sprang a mass of nude females, fully grown as they walked upon the shore. These Amazons were given life with purpose, and they would be ruled by Hippolyte and her sister Antiope, each given a mystical Gaia's girdle. You are a chosen race, born to lead humanity in the ways of virtue, the way of Gaia. Through you, all men shall know us better, and worship us always. Athena granted the Amazons wisdom, Artemis hunting skills, Demeter fruitful fields, Aphrodite love, and Hestia would build them a great city to call home. At first the poets sang of the compassion and justice to be found in Themyscira, until jealous kings threatened and bribed them to instead spread lies of murder, war, and theft. The Amazons became hated and feared outcasts of Greek society. Ares plotted against the Amazons, taunting Heracles through a prostitute prior to his decreed labor to steal a girdle from Hippolyte. Previously, maddened by Hera and indentured to the ruler Eurystheus, Heracles led an army in pursuit of this task. Flanked by Amazon archers hidden in a forest, Heracles was met by their queen, who asked the men to join them in peace and the betterment of mankind.
You expect men to follow women? Heracles is your better harlot queen.
Heracles engaged Hippolyte, and though no man was stronger than he, the Amazon queen bested him in combat.
Men, lay back. The Amazons are worthy allies indeed.
The twin forces got along famously that night, until Heracles drugged and beat Hippolyte, signaling his men to duplicate the betrayal. The Amazons were raped and placed into bondage, while Heracles took Gaia's girdle and continued on his way. Left nude and chained in a dungeon, Hippolyte was visited by Athena.
Once, the Amazons dreamed of leading mankind, but you chose to withdraw from humanity, to ignore the purpose for which you were created, and you grew bitter and corrupt.
Athena warned Hippolyte off of vengeance, and commanded she cleanse her soul and rededicate herself to Gaia if she wished to be free. Hippolyte lured her guard close with the promise of sex, then beat him and swiftly liberated her Amazons. However, the queen was horrified once she witnessed the bloodlust of her people, as it commenced with a blasphemous massacre. Antiope especially took pleasure in the killings, and following the battle, intended to pursue Heracles for slaughter. Hippolyte declared,
"No, Antiope, never vengeance, never again. Athena has spoken to me. She waits for us by the shores of the Aegean."
Antiope renounced the goddesses for allowing half her sisters to be slain and the Amazons to ever be defamed in the first place, and demanded the same from others. Menelepe argued that was the way of the dark god Ares, but Antiope had already embraced his path.
"Ares is not our enemy. We need a god of war merely to survive."
Antiope gave Hippolyte her girdle of Gaia, as,
"From this day forward, I take nothing from Olympus."
With a kiss goodbye, Antiope and her followers divided the Amazons. Having failed the goddesses, the Amazons' patrons punished them with a new responsibility. An island which acted as a prison for unspeakable evil would now serve as Themyscira. The Amazons granted immortality to serve as eternal jailers. The Amazons would continue to wear the cuff of their bounds as bracelets, reminders to never err again. Poseidon parted the seas to allow the Amazons passage to walk 3 months to their island paradise, where they would construct their ideal society in isolation. The world without greatly changed over the centuries, and their gods' voices grew ever more distant, but their duty and insular progress continued unabated. Eventually, Hippolyte felt the call of a great destiny. As Menelepe explained,
"Know that you and all the original Amazons are reincarnations. All of us knew life before the midwives plucked us from Gaia's womb, but only you, my queen, were pregnant at the time of your death. Now you hear the call of your unborn child."
Hippolyte later kneaded the form of an infant while kneeling in the clay of paradise and prayed to her goddesses. Returned to the Cavern of Souls, her patrons blessed the last remaining spirits within. Demeter granted power and strength, like that of the earth itself. Aphrodite, great beauty and a loving heart. Athena again offered wisdom. Artemis, the eye of the hunter and unity with the beasts. Hestia, sisterhood with the fire, that it may open men's hearts to her. And Hermes was present to add speed and the power of flight. Finally came great Gaia's gift, life. The empowered spirit turned clay to flesh in a flash of light, and Hippolyte held up her newborn daughter. Then shall Hippolyte honor her with the name of a great and holy warrior. She shall be Diana. The first Amazon child in 30 centuries, Diana knew 1,000 mothers, and was taught by the most learned scholars. Years later, Philippus and her guard answered a scream from the oracle Menelipe, who had a vision of an insane Ares having gained power enough to wipe out all life on Earth. A champion had to be chosen from amongst the Amazons to face the threat, and the young woman Diana wished to be included in the selection. Hippolyte forbade it, though Diana yearned for a life of purpose beyond paradise. Athena herself confirmed to Diana that her time had come. Over 250 Amazons would gather to compete for the honor of service, each masked to ensure everyone would confront their sisters anonymously and at their fullest ability. Secretly among them was Diana, who bested all her elders, then revealed her identity. Hippolyte still wished to deny Diana, but Menelipe explained, "The princess won her place rightfully. You cannot fight the will of the gods." Diana was presented with new silver bracelets to face her final test, the Flashing Thunder. Philippus drew an anachronistic 45 automatic handgun and fired 3 rounds at Diana. Each was deflected by the princess's speed and gauntlets. The origins of the weapon were not to be revealed at this time, nor was the fate of Diana's namesake, whose red, white, and blue standard would now be worn by the champion. Menelipe proclaimed, "Now is the plan of the goddesses clear, Diana. You are born into the world to be most honored among all Amazons." Today, Wonder Woman was born, to the cheers of 1,000 Amazons. Only Hippolyte smiles not, for her thoughts are of Ares, and of the words she spoke just days before. How could even the best succeed where the gods dare not go? The Princess and the Power were scripted by Greg Potter, co-plotted and penciled by George Perez, with inks by Bruce Patterson. The interior covers from Wonder Woman #1, cover dated February 1987, featured the editorial The Wonder of It All by George Perez. He wrote, "It was the fall of 1985 as I gleefully stalked into DC Comics' offices at 666 Fifth Avenue. Crisis was done. Finished. Finally, I was free of the monthly grind. One-shot stories, graphic novels, posters. Yep, that was it for me for the next 5 years. But then I heard the talk of big things happening, of new beginnings. John Byrne had been commissioned to revamp and revitalize Superman. Frank Miller's Dark Knight was inspiring the company to consider new directions on Batman. And of course, I knew that Wonder Woman was also scheduled for an overhaul. After all, Marv and I had de-evolved her in the last issue of Crisis. I had initially been asked to take over the new Wonder Woman. After all, I had expressed interest in doing a story with the Amazon Princess before her original book's demise, but now my schedule wouldn't allow it. I walked into editor Janice Race's office to find out about the future of Diana Prince. I was curious to learn who was going to draw her. Superman had Byrne and Ordway. Batman had Miller and Davis and later Mazzucchelli. Wonder Woman had no one. A writer, Greg Potter, had been selected, but no established artist wanted to handle the new series. After exhaustive searches, it seemed that Wonder Woman would have to be assigned to an unknown. Now, while that may have proven successful, it wouldn't give the book the clout and hopeful fan interest that established names seemed to bring, and Wonder Woman needed all the help she could get. I thought of John Byrne and of Superman. What a great coup for DC. A top talent and fan fave on their premier character. As Janice's eyes looked straight at me, an uncontrollable force rushed from my gut and up through my throat. It forced tongue, lips, and vocal cords to act in a dramatic unison. "Janice," I heard myself say, "what if I took on Wonder Woman for the first 6 months, just to get her out of the starting gate?" I had never been kissed by an editor before. Little did I realize what a chain reaction would follow. Suddenly there was no stopping that mouth of mine. Ideas spilled forth like a bursting dam. Other creative people got caught in the enthusiasm and volunteered ideas and opinions. There was a divine madness stirring, and at the center of it all was Wonder Woman. After over 40 years, the Princess of Paradise Island was finally getting people enthused. Changes started coming fast and furious. Suddenly a temporary 6-month stay became an unlimited commitment. Janice Race left for other endeavors, and Karen Berger took over the editing chores. It was thought a woman's input was vital for the success of the series, featuring comicdom's most well-known heroine. And Karen, being one of the most creative and respected editors around, didn't hurt matters any. Check out Swamp Thing, The Legion of Superheroes, and Blue Beetle, just to name a few of her titles. The turning point, however, really came when Karen, Greg, and I agreed that what made Wonder Woman unique was both her feminism and the Amazon legends with their roots in Greek mythology. This mythical and mystical angle definitely made Diana something other than a female Superman. Robert Greenberger continues, "The myth was recast so that Wonder Woman's story began not in World War II, but in the 1980s. The creative team found ways to fit the characters of Greek mythology with the characters of the DC Universe, and the launch was a success. From the first, Wonder Woman was both a significant seller and satisfying to loyal readers. Since then, Diana has remained a key player in the DC Universe and has enjoyed long runs by a number of contributors, including William Messner Loebs, Mike Deodato Jr., and John Byrne. And to this day, the Amazon Princess remains the single best-known female adventure hero around the world."
See, my favorite's probably the George Perez origin, where they mix a few of the earlier ones together, because it's the one that has the purest amount of Greek mythology in there. That's probably my essential origin for her, if I had to choose one.
Well, like I said, I was exposed exposed to a lot of different eras of Wonder Woman through those comics and stuff that my dad gave me in the 70s. But I must say that my favorite version of the origin story has to be the George Perez version when he rebooted the character in the 80s, because he had the opportunity to take and merge and mold all of these aspects from her entire history into one cohesive story, which I really enjoyed. And I remember reading that series. I don't know if I read every single issue, but I read so many of those issues and always enjoyed the George Perez version the most. I know I would have read it at least for 2 or 3 years. I probably didn't make it. I think he was on it for 5 or 6 years. I didn't make it all the way through to the end, but I remember reading it easily for probably the entire first 2 or 3 years, and then would pick it up occasionally after that.
Should Diana fly under her own power or rely on the invisible jet?
Well, when I was a kid, I absolutely loved the invisible jet, the whole idea of it. I was a boy, boys love trains and planes. So I loved the invisible jet, all the idea of it, the way it looked. But as I got older, I thought the idea of it maybe wasn't as realistic as I had when I was younger. And then I must say that when they introduced the idea of, well, Wonder Woman can fly because she's been given that power as a gift from Hermes, that made sense to me. And I thought, okay, I can accept this. And I generally prefer that version of her being able to fly on her own. I mean, I will say that honestly, I think that probably too many superheroes have the power of flight. I think it's a little bit of a crutch maybe with writers sometimes, but it makes sense for Wonder Woman to have that power as a gift from Hermes.
I'm kind of up in the air about it, to be honest, pun intended. It's really cool to see Diana zipping across the skies, but super strength and flight kind of makes her power set a little too close to Superman. And the invisible jet is just a classic, even if people think it's silly. Though, honestly, it's no more ridiculous than a stealthy urban ninja who claims to hate firearms driving around a giant black tank with machine guns strapped to the front.
I mean, having an invisible jet, I think that's pretty cool. But as you remember throughout the cartoon, I keep asking myself, how are they going to find that plane? And just keep laying around in there and looking at it when it passed by. I think at one point at the end of the battle, it's like, why do you have to do that? I mean, I think flying is a very cliche superpower. You don't have to fly. I mean, if you have older abilities, I'm okay with not flying. I don't think I'll be too keen to flying. That was kind of like breathing all the contaminated air on the top and all the bugs going into my mouth and ear, and eyes, and then, I'll stay on the ground. That's fine. I don't know what's this people with this whole flying thing. It's like, what? You flying like a bird? You I want to be free. I just don't really understand what's that fixation with people with, flying. I think that the way she is fine. I mean, if she can just fly an invisible plane, that's cool with me.
Oh, this is a tough one because the superpower that I would want most for myself would be the ability to fly. So I'm very much attracted to that. But for Wonder Woman, I would choose the invisible jet with the stealth technology from Paradise Island. I can really believe that. And otherwise, I really find it most exciting for her to run and to leap into action. I like to see her on the ground and using her power and her strength for her mobility.
I don't like the idea that she can fly on her own. She can have superhuman strength, agility, speed. She can leap tall buildings, but having her actually fly, I think, is too much. The invisible jet right now, today, it feels like Aquaman talking to marine animals and fish. That I think today, most people think of it as a punchline. They think it's silly, it's hokey, it's weird. It's something of a bygone era of the 77 series or the cartoons. And people don't realize that if you take it seriously and you play into the strengths, that can be really, really cool. So I like the invisible jet. I think that should be her mode of transportation. She can have like an invisible sports car too. I don't know why, but yeah, just do that. Embrace that. I don't want her to have to fly herself. I want her to actually be in the pilot seat of a craft. I like that idea.
I'm a fan of her flying under her own power. I like the idea of the invisible jet as either assault vehicle or transport for people that she's trying to save. They always portray it that you can see her and not the plane, right? That's always the big gag. So if it's truly that she's invisible when she's inside it, I think that's pretty slick, but I think it limits what you're able to do in terms of her interaction interacting with characters and what she's able to do in terms of fighting cosmic level threats if she can't fly on her own. So I vote fly.
I always kind of took it as more of a translucent jet because I think you can see it, but I'm pretty sure at jet speed it's effectively invisible.
That makes sense.
My favorite versions are whenever she has both. So I guess the Phil Jimenez era, where he gave her the invisible jet that was and spoilers for Angela if you're listening.
No worries.
The alien invisible jet by the blind monks under the Arctic. Love that one.
Because comics.
Because comics, yes. I love it. I love I think that's the Jimenez era. Yeah, I like when she has both. The flight is more of a something she can use in battle or shorter distances, and then the jet. I love it actually in Rucka's series when she was doing her book tour. Someone asked her about that at a book signing about why she has the invisible jet if she can fly anyways. And she makes the joke that it's to carry her invisible luggage.
Secret Origins, the stories behind the world's greatest heroes and villains. Issue number 6, cover dated December 2014.
The monthly monster strikes. We hate to say they did it again, but that's what Wonder Woman's Merry Men did. Again. One too many 3 martini lunches under the always bright lights of Broadway have left our stellar storytellers snorting their words and slurring their lines. But fear not, we've unearthed a story from the amazing Amazon's adolescent past. Join us now for a tale titled The Secret Origin of Wonder Woman. Originally appeared in Closet of Mystery number 7. Story by Brian. Does this dress make me look like I have a fat Azzarello? And did he just jump off a cliff Chang? Art by Goran with your bad self, Suzuka. A sunny day on Paradise Island, where Amazons do what they desire most. Spar! For glory! For honor! For love?
I'm tired of being a girl. Diana, I've longed to hear those words. I don't understand, Aleka. We've always been the bitterest of rivals. Have we? Or can we yet be best of friends? I'm not sure that I have feelings you wouldn't understand. Really? Try me. Aleka, I don't want to stay on this island. What? But this is our home. You are our princess. Oh, now I'm a princess, not Clay.
Clay, a word that stings more than the tears that run down the plucky princess's cherubic cheeks. For it's not just a word that mocks, but reminds the young Amazon from whence she came. Her barren mother, Queen Hippolyta, so desperate to have a child that she would fashion a vessel from the very earth at her knees, then fall and pray on a moonless night for the gods to breathe life into it. Sadly, rather than special, the story of her creation makes Diana feel uncomfortably different. If only she knew the truth. What really happened that night? Zeus, the king of the gods, and Hippolyta, the queen of Amazons, in the face of a forbidden love, came together and created a legend. To this day, Hippolyta still hides the truth from the precocious princess, not from shame, but from love.
Oh, Diana, if the hateful Hera knew you were the daughter of Zeus, she would have your head and my heart. I'll never let any harm come to you, my darling daughter. I've got a bad feeling, princess. Give? Never.
One judo throw later, the girls are laughing on the sand.
Oh, Aleka, can I make a confession? Of course. Your confidence is mine, and my mind is made up. There's a whole world out there that I'm determined to be a part of. No, I won't allow it. You sound like my mother. As queen, I forbid it. And as your friend, I beg you not to. Please, Aleka.
Tearfully, the red-headed, muscular Amazon cried.
It's so easy for you to turn your back on your sisters. You aren't one of us, Clay.
Later that night, in Diana's bedroom.
Man's world. It's a treacherous place. It desires only one thing, while you believe it longs for another. Though perhaps when you're older, we both can go. Make a weekend of it. Sounds like fun, Mother.
She thinks.
Not. Sigh. I know it's not easy to hear someone wants to be themselves when you want them to be someone else, but isn't that why we love? Isn't acceptance the test that proves it? All I want is to not hide who I am from anybody. I'm tired of being ashamed that I'm Clay. You, my fierce child, have nothing to be ashamed of. Certainly not in the eyes of Athena.
Great Grecian goddess! And so she was. Hera appeared in an owl costume, white with feathered cape, gray clawed fingers, gold bracelets, and an ebon shield with the visage of some terrible underworld being upon it.
Forgive me my thoughts. I do not mean to turn my back on my sisters. Is that what you're doing? Or are you facing who you are? It's a struggle. A worthy one, methinks. Really? So you're here to help me? Cool. No, child. This struggle is one that you must go alone, or its outcome won't be severed. But no, Princess Diana. You have this god's support.
Meanwhile...
Be careful, Captain Trevor. You know what they say about the Bermuda Triangle.
Ha! Do they know that I say that they are full of... Suddenly, a sudden burst of wind interrupts the brave pilot's bravado. Whoa! His engines sputter. The courageous captain girds his loins for the worst.
Looks like this is it, Steve. It's been good knowing an island. It's not on any of the charts. Don't muff this, Trevor. Just go down.
At the crash site.
Help me. Where am I?
You're the only man on an island full of women.
Sounds like paradise.
So you've heard of it. We've got to get you patched up.
Say, you're pretty strong for a girl.
No, I'm just pretty strong.
I didn't mean to offend.
That doesn't mean you didn't. So Man's World, what's it like?
It has its ups and downs.
Sounds stimulate.
Suddenly before Diana was her mother and fellow sisters, bearing arms against this potential threat.
Diana, what is that? My ticket. Can you believe it?
In the distance, Hera looks on.
I can, princess. I am a goddess who has faith in you.
Next month, be sure to pick up our Amazonian princess's ongoing adventures in her own series when A Muck Man Runs Amok.
What is your least favorite version or aspect of her origin story, and why do you dislike it?
Honestly, I'm less familiar with the born from clay or born from Zeus elements of the story, so I don't have a really strong opinion on this, so much so that I don't really remember a lot of the details of that.
Well, for me, the part of the origin story that I really dislike is having her born from Zeus. And therefore being a demigoddess, I never really liked that. I actually thought that made her less relatable as a character because she seemed less human. I know she was an Amazon, but at the same time, being a demigoddess just made her, I think, less relatable to the stories, the other characters, humanity in general. So I never really cared for that part of the origin story when it would go that direction.
I think you agree with me on this one. The New 52 origin pre-rebirth one was probably my least favorite for the obvious reasons. Throwing Zeus in there as her father, taking away the pure all-woman aspect of her origins, and of course the changes they made to the Amazons.
I just read for my show Azzarello's Wonder Woman #7 with the Amazons seducing the sailors and then killing them and selling the baby boys. Yeah, sure, it's technically more accurate to the original Greek myths, but it's really disturbing to have a character who's supposed to be all about peace and love coming from that violent of a culture and not even realizing it.
And I agree very much. So.
I knew you had good taste. I'm not surprised.
Do you prefer Wonder Woman's sword or battle axe? Neither. When I wasn't familiar with the character, I liked the idea of her using a sword, but now that I've gotten to understand her, I love the fact that she uses non-lethal defensive weapons like the bracelets and lasso.
Oh, I'd probably choose the sword because I like the visual look of sword fights. I think sword fights can look graceful or even artistic, and also makes me think of nobility, with knights in shining armor using swords, and I think Wonder Woman, has that nobility as well. And using an axe in a battle is more on the barbaric side. It makes me think of Vikings, so I don't conjure up the image of Wonder Woman with a battle axe myself.
Boy, if I had to pick one, I guess I would say battle axe. Nothing like a two-sided axe to chop off troll heads. In my prior answer, I said I wasn't a fan of any of those things, but you forced me, so.
Well, the axe seriously sounds like super violent. Just as a side note, I am a pacifist, so I like her on how she's have the lasso of truth, the shield bracelets, and all that without being too violent and without casting. Yeah, I know that in the cartoons, and I'm guessing in the other stuff that she cut off Ares' head and all that, so that's kind of violent. But for the rest of the other thing, I don't see that I saw too much violence, for which I was fine with. I hate violence. I'm pretty much in all the Marvel movies. I just hate the whole battle scene. I'm really bored to tears, and I kind of okay, speed it up, that's it, because I don't like it. So for her to have this axe that looks really bloody, super violent, and that's why I'm not comfortable with that. Now, if you talk about the sword, I think with the sword you can do more shielding and more kind of maneuvers do not cause too much damage. I mean, if you give me an option, I'll say neither, because I don't like violence. But if I have to have one, I think it has to be the sword.
For me, I guess I personally don't like the idea of either one of them very much. I think Wonder Woman's strong enough not to need either one of them, the same way Superman doesn't need either one of them. But if she's going to have one or the other, I would also definitely choose the sword. It, again, suggests a little bit more nobility that fits with a princess better. So that would be okay. Definitely not the axe, but not a big fan of either one.
See, if she has to have one of the weapons, kind of the same answer as the shield one, really. I kind of like where she does have the sword in the more recent comics, and then the axe is, once again, that's when she's going into like a really hard battle. What I like about the axe, though, is it is a chance for the artist to do some fun things with it, like the DC Universe action figures, I think it is. She has the battle axe. And it's a really cool molding where the entire axe is the eagle.
Specifically when Perez did it during Challenge of the Gods and War of the Gods. And it's like you said, when you know she's ready for business, then she brings that out, because in almost all other circumstances, she's going to extend the open hand. So when she brings the battle axe, you know things have gotten bad.
Yes, exactly.
Are there any Wonder Woman stories you'd like to recommend?
Yes, they're releasing a 3-book set for the 70th anniversary, and it has probably all the ones I would recommend. The George Perez era origin, and Greg Rucka's Down to Earth, where she's going on her book tour and dealing with media and things like that. Actually, the entire Rucka run, really. Down to Earth, Eye of the Gorgon, Mortal Enemies, I think is the third one of his. Those are the ones I would definitely recommend. Those are kind of the essentials, I'd say.
Greg Rucka's first graphic novel, The Hecate, is excellent. And I really like Gail Simone's A Star in the Heavens, which is volume 3, issues 24 and 25. It's all about Diana reacting to Hollywood making a Wonder Woman movie, and it's just great.
I definitely liked the Gail Simone run. Really liked having her involved with the storyline, and was super excited when I got a chance to meet her and get her to sign a few issues that I had. And I would recommend a more recent animated movie that borrowed heavily from the George Perez run. Really enjoyed what they did with that. And a couple of alternative versions of the characters. Amikami series that placed Wonder Woman and other characters in a design style so they looked more like manga or anime characters. Thought those designs were beautiful. The stories were easy to read and really grabbed my attention. So really enjoyed that version of Wonder Woman. And also makes me think of the current Bombshells alternative storyline. I've enjoyed that as well. So good Wonder Woman version there too.
I will say that in the past couple of years, I've tried to buy any number of trades that have been available for her. So I did get the 12 Labors of Wonder Woman, which I think is a pretty good Bronze Age story about her reclaiming the mantle of Wonder Woman and sort of rejoining the JLA. I don't mind, as sort of a historical curiosity, the white pantsuit secret agent version of her. I've read those trades as well. And I think that they're always referenced. It seems like every 5 years somebody puts her in a white pantsuit. That I think it's good to know. But if you ask me really, like, which are the arcs that I read over and over, showing that I like them, it's probably the early Rucka stuff. I'm a huge fan of one arc of the Simone run where Wonder Woman teams up with Beowulf, Stalker, and Claw. You know that I have a love for those characters, and that was a really well done story with great art by Aaron Lopresti. And I'm going to have to go back to the Messner-Loeb's Diodato stuff. I thought The Contest was a very good storyline where Artemis becomes Wonder Woman, and I thought the stories after that with the two of them both acting as Wonder Women and eventually teaming up to fight a big threat was really great.
Well, my favorite Wonder Woman moment is in one issue of the Greg Rucka run, and I can't think of the issue. It's like 216, 217 or something like that. But it's when Wonder Woman is fighting Medusa the Gorgon in like Yankee Stadium. And she goes into the fight decked out, and I'm saying, like, I already explained how much I hate her carrying a sword and axe. That's all she's doing in this thing is fighting basically a gladiatorial style battle. But she goes in there blindfolded so she can't look at Medusa and be turned to stone. And at the end of it, Wonder Woman is wounded. Diana's bleeding to death. She's got the blindfold torn off of her, but she's already cut off two of the snakes from Medusa's head. And she takes one of the snakes and pinches its mouth open and drips the poison into her own eyes. She chooses to blind herself so that she can fight freely and ends up decapitating Medusa. And I thought that was just a great all-time superhero epic moment. That was just a great thing. That was something that you could never see in a Batman story or a Superman story or something else. That was a moment that Wonder Woman could own on her own. So I loved that story. I also really liked Gail Simone's opening story arc from her run. I don't think Gail Simone had a great run. I was really, really excited for it, and I think you and I are kind of in the same place where Gail Simone, she was DC's highest profile woman, so it made sense to put her on the book, but she just didn't have the Wonder Woman stories that she wanted to tell, and Simone's interest in her voice, her writing style, tends to lean towards the darker, more sinister side of the fence, so I don't think that was right for Wonder Woman. But her first story arc, the first 4 issues, was an arc called The Circle, which was about Diana figuring out that when she was born, her mother Hippolyta's inner circle of bodyguards had this prophecy that the child would bring about their doom, that it was a mistake to have this child, so they tried to kill her. These 4 bodyguards were put in jail on Themyscira. They get out, and there's a whole thing there, and I really enjoyed that story. Not so much everything that came after that, but Gail Simone's first 4 issues I really, really liked. And other stuff that I've just started reading in the past that I hadn't read before, the Wonder Woman strips from the dollar issue era of World's Finest. I think most or all of them were written by Jerry Conway, and they were Earth 2 World War II era Wonder Woman stories. So they feel a lot like the World War II Captain America stories that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were doing in the 60s after they brought Captain America back. And it's sort of like that type of thing with Wonder Woman. So those are all good stories. Those are what I would recommend.
So for me, again, I've said it probably too many times, but the George Perez run I always have to recommend. And now you can pick up that wonderful omnibus that has the first half of his run all at once. I picked it up and started rereading it, but I haven't made it all the way through it yet. Such a nice long run. I also really enjoyed the Gail Simone run, and I must say I've enjoyed some of the recent digital runs a lot. The Sensation Comics starring Wonder Woman digital series was really great. I really enjoyed the Legend of Wonder Woman digital series, which I think I heard that it's coming back for a second season. And I've been a big fan of the Wonder Woman 77 series. It has a lot of nostalgia for me, so I'm enjoying that. And I'm super excited so far with Rebirth because I think Greg Rucka is doing a lot of what George Perez did, which is he's bringing a lot of the mythos and loose threads of Wonder Woman back together into a cohesive story. And I've read every issue of Wonder Woman Rebirth, and I've been really pleased with it.
And where else can people find you online if they want to hear or read more from you?
On the internet, you can find me at Supergirl Comic Box Commentary, which is the Supergirl blog I run. I also do Friday reviews on the Legion of Superbloggers, and I'm probably most active on Twitter at Dr. Ange70.
Special thanks and support go out to Ange, Between the Pages, Bill Bear, Brian Hackney, Coffee and Comics Blog, Comics Couplets, Greg 101, Darren Ruth Sutherland, David Galayer, David Golding, DCU Movie Page, Dr. G Nerdologist, Ed Moore and Ed Moore Jr., Emily Delicious, Firestorm Fan, Hicks, John D. Knoll, Joseph Crawford, Keith G. Baker, King Size Comics Giant Size Fun Podcast, Luke Dobb, Mario at Luther Lang, Martin Gray, Matthew at Radio Free Themyscira, Matthew Barton, Oscar Blue Devil, Paquita Trotamundos, Randy Caldwell, The Real Me, Richard Field, Ryan Daly, Silver and Gold Podcast, Siskoid, Sin, Trekker Talk Podcast, Unearthly Visions, Upstate Horror, Warlord Worlds Podcast, Warrior for Peace, Willie Yarbrough, Rin, and Xenozoic Xenophiles Podcast. Wonder Woman is the copyright of DC Comics Entertainment. This is a non-profit fan-produced podcast. No infringement of any copyrights are intended, and where copyrighted material appears, it is believed protected under fair use. If you enjoy the show, please feel free to leave a comment on the Diana Prince is the New Wonder Woman blog, the Rolled Spine podcast blog. Write to me at emailofdiabolu@yahoo.com, featuring 2 underscores, or just hit me up on Twitter at Commander Blanks or at Rolled Spine. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful week.